Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We'll just be getting started in a couple minutes, just a minute or two.
Jai Janindra, everyone. We hope that you and your families are well. My name is Sarah Jain, and I am one of the Kala chapter co-leads along with Abhisha. On behalf of the Kala chapter's team, we'd like to thank you for coming out to this session. We have an amazing lineup of speakers here today that I'm so excited to introduce. Harsha Nahata received a master's degree from the Newmark School of Journalism, where she focused on audio storytelling and cross-cultural reporting. Throughout this time, she also co-founded a company, HY Edits, to help individuals tell their stories for personal statements, cover letters, and college application essays. Her work has been featured in the Juggernaut, Brown Girl magazine, and the Indian Scene, among others. Rachna Shah is a senior at Dartmouth College, where she studies history and economics with a focus on health economics. On campus, she is a stamped scholar and has been a research assistant at her college's business and public health schools. During her time away from Dartmouth, she has interned in consulting and public health. Mansi Shah is a recent graduate of Rutgers University, where she studied cell biology and neuroscience. She is currently serving as an AmeriCorps member at Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program. Mansi is a Fulbright finalist and student member of the board of directors of the Academic Consortium on Criminal Justice Health. She is currently applying to medical schools and is interested in the intersection of mass incarceration and health. Unfortunately, Neelam Savla, our fourth panelist, is unable to join us today. However, we know that you may have been looking forward to hearing her input. Neelam is the Associate Director at the University of Southern California Admission Center and has over 8 years of admission experience, having recruited and reviewed applications for thousands of new undergraduate students. In the near future, Abhi and I will record a follow-up session with her, answering any questions from this webinar and any other questions that may come up for her, and we will send it to your email so you don't miss out on her valuable insight. Without further ado, let's get started. If at any time you have any other questions for our panelists, please send them in a private chat to Ria Vora, Janak Shah, or Sakhi Shah.
Hey guys, so thanks for joining, and I'll start with the first question. This one I'll refer to Harsha, and this is, how do I stand out?
Hi everyone, I'm super excited to be chatting with you all, and of course, college applications are a stressful time, but I hope also exciting. So for this first question, how do you stand out? I think I like to approach it in a little bit of a different way. So, because I think there's a lot of pressure on having like the right resume or the right essay to really make a mark in college admissions, especially as they start to feel more competitive. But I think what really is memorable, both like in the admissions and application process, and I think you'll find throughout life, like as you're interviewing for different jobs or internships or submitting different cover letters, is like it's more about how to put the most honest and authentic version of yourself on the table, kind of, because that's what really speaks to people and helps people connect with you and helps people remember you. And so even when you're thinking about like what experience to highlight or what parts of like high school, whether activities or classes to focus on, I think a good place to start is what you're like genuinely really sort of excited about, passionate about, or what has really sort of stuck with you, whether it was a difficult moment or a good moment, because I think that authenticity really carries through. So that's kind of my take on this. And when you're thinking about it specifically in your essay, because a lot of times that's what people want to stand out, a lot of things that I've told people when I've been mentoring them on essays is you really want to read your essay and even other parts of your application. And if you could easily copy and paste a sentence for somebody else and it would be like fine, or like you could like use that for somebody else and it wouldn't really like make a difference, then like maybe it's not super authentic or unique to you, if that makes sense. But also I'm sure.
Awesome, thank you for that response. And Mansi, would you like to chime in here?
Yeah, sure. Also very excited to be here. So it's great to see that so many of you are interested in learning more about the college admission process. I just want to add that I think you can also think about, maybe one or two experiences that can weave into a greater story about who you are and what you would offer to a college community. I made the mistake of speaking in broad generalities when I was writing my college admissions essay, and now I know that those details, that like Harsha was saying, those details are very specific to you and your story. So in my college essay, I was talking about marching band because that was something that I loved during high school. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of South Asians who are in the band. And so it's okay to speak about experiences that are meaningful to you, but as long as you can connect it to, how you made an impact, how you overcame a challenge. Maybe you had a leadership role. And I think that it's also fine not to include everything that you've been involved in your essay, because that can be very overwhelming. So yeah, main takeaways in terms of standing out is how you can connect with people through specific details and moments in your life, whether it had to do with maybe one or two experiences or some themes that you think have been present throughout your life that you can convey through your essay.
Thank you, Harsha and Mansi. Those were some really good answers. So the next question is, it is late September. What should be some of your priorities in terms of the application process right now? Rachna, if you want to start with this one.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachna. Really nice to see you all here today. I remember 4 years ago when I was going through this process, it was quite stressful. So happy to see you all are engaged with this process. So thinking about some of the priorities, I would say one of them is really making sure you're starting to build out your list of colleges. So your safety, your target, your reach schools, and understanding and learning more about those colleges. So I know that there aren't in-person visits this year, but if you can talk to students who attended your high school who have gone to those colleges, if you have any friends, any online research that you can do to really try to better understand these schools. I would also say that it's important, I guess, in late September to start thinking about some financial aid. I know that the FAFSA applications opened up around August 1st, so trying to learn more about that process so you're more prepared when it rolls around. For essays for college applications, I would recommend trying to think about your broad common app essay and really writing out an initial draft, maybe in early September or in October, just to make sure that you have enough time to go through iterations of it, to get feedback from friends, from family, from professors before you're starting your supplementary essays.
Great. Thank you so much for your response, Rachna. Moving on to the next question, we have how many colleges should I apply to? And more specifically, how many safeties, targets, and reaches should I be thinking of? And we'll start with Mansi for this question.
I think you'll hear from a lot of people that there may not be like one specific number. I think on average, people probably apply to, like most students probably apply to 7 to 10 schools. But I think it definitely depends on your specific interests and financial situation, because of course, applying to more schools does get expensive. If you're looking to stay closer to home, or if you have a specific major or program that you're interested in, that might already limit the pool a little bit. But I think that you can think about all those different factors, and typically people usually aim for like 2 to 3 safety schools, 4 to 5 target schools, and maybe 2 to 3 reaches. Of course, those numbers aren't perfect, but just about on average, what I've heard most people have done. And yeah, I think that the number, there definitely is no perfect one, but if you can think about what you really appreciate in a school, and if you can make a list. I know narrowing it down sometimes can be tricky, but I think it's great to be a little bit ambitious, but also realistic. So finding that balance is definitely something that takes time, and you may need to speak to people about.
Thank you, Mansi. Next question, what are some common mistakes that people make in essays? Harsha, if you want to answer this one.
Definitely. So for the last couple of years, I've been editing quite a few essays. And so I kind of compiled a list of like the 6 things I see most, like 5 or 6 things. So the big one I think is like, and a lot of people will say this, is like, don't just like regurgitate your resume, but I think it's kind of hard to really like understand what that means. And so what I've noticed a lot of people doing is like, either you'll like list as many things as you possibly can, and a lot of times, because you don't have the space for it, it'll end up being like just one sentence that's like somehow trying to fit in that you were like in this one club, or like you also did this. And it's just hard because it's really easy to see that you haven't really like been thoughtful about that part of it compared to the rest of the essay, right? So I think if you're ever feeling pressure to include a lot, it's good to take a step back and be like, what am I really trying to like accomplish here? Why does it feel important to include this? Because at the end of the day, if you list things but you don't have like reflection around it in your essay, it's pretty much like just the same as not including it. And then the other way that I kind of see this play out is that people will spend a lot of time describing a situation or a scenario or an organization they're in, right? So if you're part of an organization in school, you'll get into like a lot of detail about like exactly what the organization does, and like maybe like all of the events that they hold and all of the things you've done with them. Or like, I don't know, if you're on the tennis team, you'll start talking about like a particular match, and you'll be describing like that match from like start to finish. And it feels like you're putting in a lot of detail, which I'll get to later because detail is very key, like Mansi said, but you want to be very mindful of what details you're putting in. So your entire essay basically should function to talk about you, which can be very awkward for some people, but you're really trying to center and tie everything back to something about you, whether it's something you learned, whether it's something that shaped you, whether it's something you reflected on, whether it's something it made you like think about differently. So like you're really like every detail you share, you want to think of it as bringing the person who's reading your essay back to like how it had an impact on you. Going off of that, kind of like Mansi said, details are really important. So I often will go through essays, and whenever I see phrases like this would give me many opportunities, or a phrase that's like meaningful skills, like an array of diverse things, I like cut them, or I will like make a note and be like, if you took these words out, your essay wouldn't read any differently. And especially when you have a word count, like if you can find sentences where literally if you remove the sentence, the meaning wouldn't change, a lot of times that sentence itself doesn't really say anything. So like be very mindful of being very vague, and it's like much better to just take a moment and instead of saying like many opportunities, just flesh out what exactly those opportunities are. It's like a much better use of your space, and it's like honestly almost easier to write when you're not being so vague. And then just the last few things, which will all show up, I have like a couple of examples that I'll just read for you guys, which I think might be helpful. So like a sentence structure that I feel like I've seen a lot is like something along the lines of, while my team and I were performing an analysis, I kept thinking back to my conversations with the different sales team members. And so this is a really good example of like both like being kind of vague, right? Because like I don't know what the analysis is, I don't know what the conversations are, but also I've seen people do this a lot when they're introducing an idea in a paragraph. So you kind of are setting it up. You're like, I was thinking about conversations, and you're using a sentence to say that instead of just telling me what the conversations are. So I had a professor describe it as like kind of going to the bat and teeing up, but just not swinging. And so you spend a lot of time and a lot of words telling people what you're going to talk about when you can really just go in and talk about it, if that makes sense. And so I think whenever you can, I would really try to read for stuff like that and be like, okay, is this what I'm using because it's harder for me to just say what I want to say? And if that's the case, then that's something you can edit in later drafts and really get to the core of what you're saying. And then the last thing that I know is really hard to learn, even like when I was taught it in school, it took a long time for it to really land, is active voice versus passive voice. Like people use passive voice a lot in essays, and especially in a personal statement or a college application essay, like you want to show that you're the one that's like taking action, like you're the one that's doing something. Like it's sort of like a way to show like your own initiative in a way. And so people will write something like, another example, my healthcare background has given me exposure to some of the problems facing the industry today. And you're just like, that's like passive voice because you're saying like the background has given you something versus like you taking action. And it makes a huge difference. Like you could rewrite something like that and be like, with my healthcare background, I can do blah, 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 right? And see how it sort of just shifts the focus and is like an action that you're taking versus something that's being done to you. It's a really hard thing to sometimes like imagine when you're not seeing it, but I'm hoping even just hearing this, like you'll start noticing it in your essays, because I see it so much. And I think it ends up making your essay sound a lot weaker. So that's something to definitely read for. Oh, and then a couple questions from the chat. So somebody asked about a supplemental essay, and I'm glad that you all did. So if it's a supplemental why XYZ school essay, I think you want to really, and we can talk about this in later questions around like if you can reuse essays, but I think if it's a supplemental essay that's specifically asking you about the school, you want to try to make sure that you have a few specifics that feel like you've actually done research into the school. And so I think stay away from broad things like, I would get it like exposure to a lot of different classes. Like it's way more powerful to be like, I'm excited about learning from this particular professor, or like, I'm excited because I've seen how like this class gives you the opportunity to do some type of thing. And sometimes that's hard because you're looking up a lot of schools, and in undergrad, a lot of things are just like general curriculum that you have to do. But I think where you can finding things through admissions officers and other people who have gone there that feel specific and unique to the school helps. And then I think I'd be curious, so other supplemental, if there's other questions about supplementals, we can address them at the end too, because I think there's a lot of different types of supplementals. But that's an overview.
Thank you for that really good and really detailed response. Moving on to our next question, we have, is it better to apply undecided or choose a major and then switch later? And we'll have Rachna start with this one.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that this might probably depend on the college. I know for some colleges, you might declare a major as soon as you start, but from my experiences, I didn't declare my major until I was near the end of my sophomore year, and that was just the process. So I think it really depends on the school that you're applying to and what their programs are for specific majors. I would say that if you're deciding between applying with a certain major or applying undecided, really think about if you have an interest in that major and if you feel as though that interest is reflected in the classes you've taken, experiences you've had, extracurriculars you've been involved with, so that the admissions department really knows that you have an interest in that major and you'd be motivated to continue, I guess, with that throughout college. But also on the side, if you're really unsure, if there are so many different majors that you're interested in thinking about, I think that's definitely okay to apply undecided. I don't think that it would penalize you in any way.
Yeah, just to add on to that real quick, I think it's also perfectly fine to switch majors if you decide that maybe what you're trying out isn't really matching your interests. I think that's something that a lot of people are afraid of because they think they're going to, add on time or lose time. But I think it's totally okay. And you'll realize, like, as you're starting your college classes, that those opportunities to explore, you really won't have that chance another time. So I think it's really great to be able to even take classes outside of your intended major. And maybe after a year or two, when you're a little more sure about the way that you want to go, you can, still have flexibility within your school.
Thank you, Rachna, and thank you, Mansi, for adding on. Next question, Harsha, I know you touched on this a little bit already, but can we recycle parts of one essay for other essays?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a little bit complicated. I feel like possibly for sure. I've seen people do it and it can work. I think a lot of it comes down to making sure that you're still answering, like, especially if you're recycling something that you've written before, like you want to make sure it's still answering the prompt of the new essay. And so just an example is like a lot of schools will have diversity essays sometimes as a supplemental. And we've noticed that while they seem like they're about the same essay, sometimes the prompts are worded just like a tad bit differently, right? Like it could be, what will you uniquely contribute to campus versus what is a community that you belong to, right? And so the way we kind of approach that is that you can, like, I feel like I recommend where you can use like the same structure and anchor points and maybe like parts of the same story, but then you would want to tailor it to what makes the most sense for the school. And a lot of times, like, we've had students who we've worked with through our editing service who've done multiple essays with us, and what'll end up happening is like the core story stays the same, but maybe if they're applying to a program that has like more focus on one particular aspect of it, we'll spend a little bit more time fleshing out a paragraph that they can add in that touches on that. So the short answer is you definitely can recycle parts of an essay, but you're still always like, to be the most effective, I feel like mindset wise, you want to still approach it as though you're tailoring the essay to the school or the program or the prompt that you're applying to. And that might mean a mix of sort of copy pasting and then changing wording and like adding in details or taking away details based on what's most relevant. And then just the last thing, if you are doing this, I mean, I heard it in admissions tours, I'm sure you all have too, but like you always want to make sure you have the right school name. And I think just can't say that enough because it's a really easy thing to forget when you're balancing like many schools and many supplements, but like, it's like always double read your essay for the right names because I've definitely seen people mess that up and it's not great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. Next up, we have, how do you apply to scholarships And is it separate from applying to the school itself? And we'll start with Mansi for this question.
Yes, so scholarships, I think someone mentioned this earlier, but you can have merit-based scholarships as well as need-based scholarships. Depending on the school, you may automatically be considered for merit-based scholarships. So I went to Rutgers University, which is the state school of New Jersey, and for us, as soon as you apply, you're automatically considered for different types of merit-based scholarships. But for need-based, there's the FAFSA, and then there's you have to submit basically, and your school may either take either federal, state, or institutional grants that would be applied towards that. And I'm not as knowledgeable about FAFSA, so if anybody else wants to chime in for need-based, please do. But I think that there's lots of online resources and other websites. Sometimes I actually have a couple links I'll put in the chat right after this. But even if you are part of some clubs, like I think Interact is a volunteer organization that I was a part of in high school, and the Interact Rotary in my high school or in my town basically gave out scholarships every year to graduating seniors. So you should also inquire about those if you have some organizations that you're a part of. They may already have scholarships. They won't be obviously very large amounts, or it may be like a few $100s, but I think anything helps. So definitely look into those that you can apply to currently as a high school student. And I will also, there are other websites. I'll put it in the chat right after this, but if anyone has additional info on needs-based, please feel free to add.
Thank you, Mansi. The next question is, how can I or should I incorporate Jainism into my college essay? Harsha, if you want to start with this one.
Yeah, definitely. So I think this kind of goes back to my first response is if it feels authentic and if it feels like a part of your life that you want to talk about, I think 100%. And I've read a few like really powerful essays around identity and like kind of the community that people belong to where they have focused on Jainism. But I think it really comes down to what feels like an authentic part of your life. And like even with Jainism, like are there parts that have really shaped you? Is there stuff you've been involved with through like a temple or something like YJA? Is there like leadership you can show? Because I think sometimes questions about like identity or hardship can fall into sort of these like generic formulaic structures for essay editing. And it kind of goes back to what Mansi was saying at the beginning is like, regardless of what topic or thing you're talking about, you want to still make it unique to you and just authentic to you. And so I think that's kind of what you want to think about, even if you want to talk about Jainism, just like even within that, what are like the stories or the moments or the specific things that have shaped you and like really getting into those details.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that response. Next up, we have, should you apply to a school even if you aren't sure you would actually go there? And if Rachna could start off with this one.
Definitely. So I think when you're thinking about applying to schools, I would definitely recommend that you don't over apply. So don't put yourself in the position where you're applying to 20 or 30 schools just for the sake of it if you're not interested in those schools. And even if you are like really helping to narrow it down a bit to like decrease the time and pressure off yourself. So I think that there can be another side to that though. So maybe you see a school and you think you might be interested, you're not sure if it's the best fit for you, but as you learn more throughout the process, you think that it might be. So I think that it can be helpful if there's a school you think you might be interested in to apply to it, but definitely don't apply to school just for the sake of applying.
Thank you, Rachna. Mansi, this next question's for you. What time of the year should I start writing my college apps for the early deadline?
Yeah, so definitely you would want to make sure you have your drafts started. I think that a lot of like early decision, you may need to apply by November, early November. So right now would be a really good time to make sure that you're getting those drafts completed, that you're sharing it maybe with a few mentors, maybe some friends, and don't overshare, because I think a lot of feedback can also be overwhelming. So pick a few people that you think would be helpful in editing. And a lot of times with early decision, you will hear back from the school by December. And so it's going to be a much quicker timeline than the other regular decision.
Thank you, Mansi, for that response. Next up, we have, who are the best people to ask to review your essays, and how many people or viewers is too many? And we'll have Harsha answer this one.
Awesome. Yeah, so I guess just echoing kind of what Mansi said too, there's definitely like the downside of like too much feedback. It can be really, really overwhelming. Also, too much feedback really close to the deadline is very overwhelming. So one thing that I tell a lot of people is like, oh, can you hear me? Oh, so as Mansi was saying, like too much feedback can definitely be overwhelming. And then also too much feedback really close to a deadline can be very overwhelming. So I often will tell students that we work with, like, sometimes it's unavoidable, like you're working last minute, you're balancing a lot of stuff, and like you need to get feedback very quickly. But really, like having at least a week helps a lot, because like more so for your own mental health, because it's really hard to like feel like you have to make a lot of changes very quickly when you are also operating under a deadline. And then honestly, like writing already can be very anxiety inducing for a lot of people. So that pressure of like having a lot of feedback that you have to incorporate right before a deadline like only makes it harder. Having said that, I think I mean, not to put a shameless plug in, but I do with my partner run an editing service, HY Edits, and I can send information later. But something that I think helps is getting people who might not know the do when we're working with students in our editing service, is that we're hoping that the feedback we give you just makes you a stronger writer overall, because a lot of what like makes a really good essay also comes from just like honing your storytelling skills and honing your writing skills. And honestly, like I had a really incredible English teacher in high school. And even then I felt like I learned a lot of this like after the fact. It's just like not always a style of writing, specifically like writing about yourself and specifically writing in detail about what you care about, what you're passionate about, what your dreams and goals are. It's not something that comes naturally to people, even if you think like you're a great writer or a good student. And I think something that I've definitely struggled with is sometimes you'll ask people for feedback, parents, certain teachers, who might have their own ideas of what an essay should look like. And so I can't like say necessarily who the best people to ask are, but I really think like be very careful and critical of feedback as well, because sometimes you'll get a lot of people being like, oh, you should write about this, or you should tell this story, or like this would make a good story. And like even in our editing service, we try really hard never to shape somebody else's story. Like at the end of the day, it should be what feels most authentic to you. It should be something that's coming from you. And so I think like trusted teachers, people who are maybe older, like friends or family friends who've gone through the process, are good people to get feedback from. And then I think at the end of the day, also having people who maybe like look at essays more regularly can help, just like with seeing sort of like structural level things, or things around like making sure you entered the prompt correctly, or making sure that you're not like making a common mistake. But I think the biggest thing is to give yourself time to take in the feedback, and to make sure you're not getting so much feedback that you'll kind of be paralyzed by it.
Thank you, Harsha. So last question of the ones we have planned, and then we're going to go ahead and go to the questions you're sending us in the chat. Rachna, this question is for you. How do you keep track of the different parts of each school's application and stay organized through this process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So thinking about how you can stay organized. So the way that I did it when I was doing the application process is I had a Google spreadsheet. So with all of the different schools that I was applying to, deadlines, types of materials that I would need, and then recommendations. And if, for example, there was a supplemental essay for one of those colleges, I would create a hyperlink in the Google Sheet and link it to somewhere else. And I would have this Google folder and separate folders for each of the colleges that I was applying to, just to make sure that you really stay organized there. And it also maybe thinking about there's like these reminder apps that you can have that will remind you like 2 weeks or what maybe for the deadline, just to keep track of everything for school. So I feel like everyone definitely has their own organization system. Some people want to be like more overly organized or less organized, but whatever really works best for you to stay on top of everything.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your response. So that concludes our planned questions for today. And now we're going to move on to some of the questions you guys asked in the chat. And I'll start with this one. Is it okay to apply early action or regular action? So if anyone wants to chime in here and give their thoughts, feel free.
Yeah, I can take a go at this first. So I think it's definitely okay to apply early action or regular action to a school. I know that if you do apply early action, sometimes there's the idea that there is a better chance that you're going to be accepted into school. But if you really are committed to the school, I think it's a great way to show that you're committed to them by applying early. But definitely don't feel overly pressured by early action. It can sometimes be an even more competitive pool than the regular action pool. So I know people who applied early to a school and then applied and were deferred and applied for every regular admission and got in. So definitely okay to do either, but don't feel pressured by early action.
Thank you, Rachna. So just once again, a reminder, if you have any questions, please send them in the chat to either Saki, Ria, or Janak. The next question is, what should we focus on for the Why Us essay?
So I think they mean like the why us from the school's perspective is going to be my interpretation of this. And so I think those are sometimes like the hardest essays to write. It becomes easier if you're applying to a particular program within a school, but like we talked about earlier, like sometimes you have an idea of what you want to apply to and sometimes you don't. But what I think a lot of schools are looking for in this type of essay, like the quote unquote like why us essay, is that you've just done your research and that you've invested like time in learning about them. And I think like even something as simple as like for me, even when I applied to grad school, I did this, like being able to say like, I talked to this person in admissions, or I talked to this student, or I talked to like this professor and I was really excited about like the way they approach their work or like by the experience that they've had, right? Like it's just like those moments that show that you have actually made an effort to get to know the school and try to figure out if you're going to be a good fit. And I think there's a lot of ways you can do this. So it really varies on like the type of program you're applying to and sort of like your own background. But some things I've seen are like definitely like calling out certain classes, certain professors that you might want to learn with, or like a certain approach to a type of program. So like if you're looking at a school that like, I don't know, like maybe does pre-med coursework in a particular way, or if you're looking at a school that like has a particular like emphasis on like a type of business coursework or whatever, right? Like anytime you can be like, oh, I really vibe with sort of like the way you approach your work. That's like really great. Of course, that's a lot harder to do in undergrad. And so another way to kind of do this, especially when you're not able to visit campus in person, maybe is to look at kind of like values and missions of a school, maybe to look at like demographics of a school. So like the grad program that I ended up applying to was like 50% people of color, and they like really prioritized having people of color in their program. And like that was something that was like very important to me personally, because I don't want to feel like I wasn't like represented, right? And like that's not going to be the case for everyone. That's why this is like a hard one. It like really depends on your situation. But I think a lot of that can all be stuff that you can use. And I would just say that like be very attentive when you are attending like even online info sessions or talking to admissions counselors or talking to current students, because you are kind of looking for the things that really speak to you that you feel like you can talk about when a school is asking you like, why us? And so I think that that's kind of the biggest thing. But again, a lot of this is school to school. So if there's anything specific that you all are curious about, feel free to chat that as well.
Thank you, Harsha, for that response. Our next question will be, what are the best combinations of clubs and activities that make you most appealing to colleges?
I can start with this one. I think right off the bat, like what I would want to say is that there is no like formula or set of clubs that colleges will look at and say, okay, like this is the right applicant. I think do what speaks to you and what feels like you really enjoy doing in your time when you're not taking classes and having to prepare for school. I think if you can find a balance, like you don't need to overwhelm yourself and be part of 6 or 7 clubs. I think in high school, I also made the mistake. Like I look back on it now and I think I really could have just joined 2 clubs and have been really passionate about those two. And I think I would have spent my time a lot more effectively doing, maybe the 2 things that I really, really enjoyed versus joining 5 clubs and feeling like I had to be at all these meetings, throughout the week. So I think that there is no combination. I'm sorry, I can't give you like a formula, but I think that if you are really, if you're thinking about maybe being pre-med, but you really find engineering and other like tech innovation interesting, then you can join clubs at your schools that are related to that. I think it's fine if the orgs that you're part of don't necessarily match the major that you're planning to pursue in college. I think that it's in a way that makes you more interdisciplinary, and that's something that a lot of colleges are also looking for.
Thank you, Mansi. The next question is, who should write my letters of recommendation and how important are these in the decisions process?
I can start to answer this, and then if anybody else has thoughts, please share. So when you're thinking about letters of recommendation, I think again, like you want people who maybe I tried personally to find people who had seen me in different roles. So like teachers that I maybe had also like who had like I'd been in classes with, but who had also seen me like maybe in a like extracurricular activity or a sport or like a leadership position, because I think you want people who can speak to like many different parts of you. And so and also, and I don't know how everyone's high schools are structured, but if you have the opportunity to take classes with the same teacher multiple times, like that helps because they've seen you over like a period of time. I think in college, it's like professors that you've maybe taken like multiple classes with as you go on. And then if you have done like meaningful work outside of school, or if you have like a boss or somebody like that you've like consistently volunteered with, like that's also a good balance. Sometimes I think schools, at least like when I was applying, but correct me if I'm wrong, like might specify like having somebody who's seen you in an academic sense, like at least one person. But I think a good thing to think about is like, can this person speak to like different parts of me? Because I think that'll hopefully like give colleges a really full picture of who you are.
Thanks, Harsha. Next up, we have, where should I be in this process as a high school junior? What should I be focusing on?
I can start with this one. So I would say that as a high school junior, there are like maybe like 2 things to focus on. So first, maybe more indirectly related to the college applications process. So taking your standardized tests if you're taking them, your ACT, SAT subject tests, making sure that your classes are going to be challenging you and also show different sides of your academic ability. And then in the extracurricular organizations that you're involved with, maybe taking on more of a leadership role in those. I think indirectly on the college side, something that I didn't know too much about until my junior year, but I know a lot of my friends did. Sometimes colleges will have summer programs. So if you're really interested in a college, maybe looking into those summer programs between your in the summer between your junior and senior year.
Thank you, Rachna. Next question. Is it a good idea to put something on your application that you know a lot of people will talk about? For example, certain clubs that are very popular.
I can start with this one. So I would say that if a club is very popular, I think it just really depends on what your role within it is, because a lot of people are going to be involved, for example, in a basketball team or playing a similar type of instrument, just because there are only limited number of types of these activities. But it's really about what you did in that club, what was unique to you, what impact you made, and how that reflects on the type of person you are, the type of person you're going to contribute to in this college community, and really highlighting the difference that you made. So I definitely think it's okay to include a more common activity as long as the impact that you made within the activity is more unique than just being a member.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachna. Next up, we have another question. How can I write an extracurricular essay well?
I can start with this, I guess. So I remind me if I'm wrong. So I think with extracurricular essays, a lot of times I've noticed them be like the 250 word ones, or like the one, like they're like a lot shorter. And it's usually just asking you, like, it's like almost giving you more space to like talk about an experience more in depth. Of course, if it's a longer supplement, then that's a different conversation. But if it's a shorter supplement and it's really only giving you like 150 to 250 words, you really just want to get at the core of like what you've done in that activity and what that activity has meant to you. It's almost like, I think in a way, like I will try to approach it as like an extended like resume blurb, where you're really just able to like dive a little deeper into something that's meant a lot to you, and like share maybe like one really powerful moment or like reason that it's meant a lot to you. And so I think extracurricular essays sometimes can be hard for people because they're very short, and because it's kind of like, okay, I've already talked about this in my resume, like you've already seen all my extracurriculars, like what else am I going to say about this? Very much understand that frustration. But I think it's really just a moment for you to like highlight why that means so much to you and highlight what means a lot to you. And so even thinking about it like that is like, what the essay is really asking is you to talk about something that means a lot to you and why. And then I think that makes it a little bit easier and less daunting. Of course, if there's like a specific prompt or a specific word length that you're struggling with, like feel free to also like direct message me later or whatever. Like we can talk through that some more, because I think those essays also vary a lot by school.
Thank you, Harsha. So last question, how beneficial is having a job rather than volunteering when applying to colleges?
I can take this one. So I think that if you, you have limited time and you feel like you aren't able to do both, which is totally okay. I think there's a lot of skills that you can learn from having a job or even from volunteering. They may be very distinct skills, but I think that as long as you're able to talk about how you've spent your time and what you've learned from it, how you've grown as a person, I personally don't think that admissions officers would, look down on an applicant who had to, maybe take extra shifts during the week and was unable to volunteer during that time, like other students may. So I think it's really just about how you're framing what you did with your time and what you've learned from those experiences. Because I think the skill sets, like from a job, you may have a very different set of responsibilities than if you were a volunteer, maybe at a nursing home, at a hospital, or at a library, for example. You can just learn a lot of very different things. So I think that regardless, if you feel like working is something that will benefit you, your family, and you're looking to diversify some of those skills, then I would say go for it. And anyone else have anything else to add? Go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Monsi, for that response. Our next question is, if I have a few similar clubs, for example, multiple dance groups or student government, etc., is it fine if I put them in the same activity slot?
I can take this one first. So when thinking about grouping activities that might be similar, I would just make sure that if you are grouping activities that are similar, that your roles in each of them are going to be highlighted. So it's not as though you're just lumping them together if they are pretty distinct. And if you want to aspect different highlight as different aspects of yourself through different activities, it might be better to put them separately. But if they are pretty similar and you're low in activity space, I think it's definitely okay to group them together. I remember when I was in high school, I was doing like a lot of biology competitions and Olympiads, and I did group those together. But then like in the summary description, I just put like individual notes denoting accomplishments in each of those. So I think that can also be a fine.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachna, for that response. So we'll conclude with our questions here. So first of all, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, Mansi, Harsha, and Rachna, for taking the time to be part of the session. Again, we're sorry that you weren't able to hear from Neelam, but we'll send a recording of our answers to your emails shortly. We'd also like to thank our team, Ria Vora, Sakhi Shah, and Janak Shah, for helping plan this event. We had about 50 participants today, and we really hope you enjoyed this session and got some useful insights out of it. And actually, this session was the first of a couple events that we have planned to help you all through the college admissions process. During the week of October 12th, we will be hosting college info sessions for a number of different colleges across the United States, such as Harvard, Rutgers, Berkeley, UIUC, and plenty more. So if you're interested, definitely stay tuned for more information. And lastly, we'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming, and we hope to see you at our future events. Thanks, guys.